The following program is an original production of WYCC PBS Chicago.
A giant step closer to equality. After a long battle, same-sex marriage is about to become Illinois law, but the historic session in Springfield ends with a major piece of unfinished business. On pension reform, lawmakers say, wait till next year.
Chicago aims to be the most bike-friendly city in the nation, but are drivers along for the ride?
Plus, in today's digital age, what's the outlook for the newspaper industry in what was once known as a great newspaper town? Those stories and much more tonight on In the Loop. Good evening, I'm Chris Bury.
And I'm Barbara Pinto. Tonight, a closer look at the explosive growth of cycling here in Chicago.
Soon you'll see many more of those powder blue Divvy bike stations. This week, Mayor Emanuel announced a major expansion that will make Chicago home to the biggest bike sharing program in the nation.
But there are dangers on the road. Between 2005 and 2010, more than 8,000 Chicago cyclists were injured in accidents. 32 were killed.
Tonight we meet someone who practically lives on his bike and hear from those who are annoyed by all the additional bikes on the streets. This is the start of a typical day for 26-year-old Lebster Pabone, who works at Westtown Bikes on Division Street. After making a few adjustments to his bike, Lebster suits up in layers of clothing, preparing for a ride downtown. Then it's time to hit the road.
It's still a bike lane, but you still want to stay away from the door zone, you know? Safety first.
Lebster is a careful rider, using hand signals and coming to a stop at red lights. He's very aware of the dangers of riding a bike in Chicago.
This is one of the worst intersections for bikes. A lot of confusion with the bike lanes and the cars. I think I know a couple people that have gotten into a couple accidents there.
Vivid, sobering reminders are scattered around the city, whitewashed bikes or ghost bikes, marking spots where cyclists have been killed. 32 fatal bike crashes occurred in Chicago between 2005 and 2010. In May, 26-year-old Robert Bobby Can was killed, allegedly by a drunk driver in the River North neighborhood. Fellow bikers held a ride of silence for him. This section of Clybourne where he was killed has been renamed Honorary Bobby Can Way.
And even if you're wearing a helmet, you know, full of reflectors, with lights, you never know when someone's gonna open a door or someone's gonna, you know, not see you through their blind spot.
In recent years, more bikers have hit the streets. Now more than 15,000 commute in Chicago. The city has responded by building more designated bike lanes. Its goal is to create a 645-mile network of bike lanes by the year 2020, including a new 3-mile-long elevated parkway called the 606. An old rail line converted to parkland will extend from Logan Square to Bucktown.
And I think it'll be a great place for kids to learn how to ride bikes because they'll be able to go nearly 3 miles without having to cross the street.
The 606 trail is expected to be complete by next fall, and those blue Divvy bike stations are popping up all over, more than 300 now, with plans to install so many more that Chicago will become the nation's top city for bike sharing. But some Chicagoans question the wisdom of the city's big push for more bike-friendly streets.
Why do we have to have bikes in the cities? You can take the bus, you can take the train, you can walk, you can take a taxi, or you can drive a car. But bikes in the streets, especially downtown Chicago, is not good.
Bikers complain about drivers not sharing the road, and drivers complain about bikers darting in and out of traffic.
They see each other as a nuisance and they see each other as a threat. And as far as I can see, they're not willing to give each other any leeway.
Lebster, who teaches safe cycling to his students, says the city streets are a public space and everyone should understand how to share them. Meanwhile, he hopes future generations will be more accepting and more educated about biking.
I think that anybody, you wake up mad and you get on a bike and you'll be smiling. You know, that's the best therapy there could be.
And joining us today is Jim Merrill, campaign manager for Active Transportation Alliance. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Are there enough bikers in Chicago to truly justify the investment that's being made, or is it a matter of build it and they will come?
You know, I think you hit the nail on the head saying build it and they will come. I think what's happening in the city right now is we're sort of in this transition zone where we're going from some of the hardcore cyclists who are out there who don't really need any accommodation. They're strong and fearless. But if we really want to take advantage of sort of the myriad benefits that increased cycling can have for the community, we need to make it mainstream. And in order to do that, one of the most important barriers that we have to overcome is addressing the perception of safety on the streets. And sort of refitting our streets and engineering to accommodate cyclists is one of the best tools in our toolbox to make that happen.
You say refitting and re-engineering the streets. Chicago obviously was not built for bicycles. It was built for cars and trucks. Is retrofitting a city an uphill battle?
Well, that's interesting, and I guess I would also say that it wasn't that long ago that we retrofitted the city for cars, and so Chicago is a great transportation town, and we've gone through many iterations of our streets transforming. So I think there's often an assumption that the streets have always been for cars, but it wasn't that long ago before the cars were the guests on the streets, and I think. Anytime you're seeking to make a change, especially to something as big and complex as the street system, it's going to be a challenge. But we know that there's this pent-up demand that people want this, and so really the things that are happening in the city are just kind of responding to that demand.
We saw in the setup piece there the ghost bikes, kind of a reminder of how many cyclists have been killed. It's still a very dangerous place to bike in Chicago. And what about on the safety issue that you bring up, what about the relationship between drivers and cyclists? Is it still very precarious in this city?
Well, I think it depends on who you talk to and their experiences. We live in a big city, and a lot of people get around in a lot of different ways, and they've had many different experiences, both as cyclists and as drivers. But I think it's important to remember that most people that ride bikes also drive cars. Most people that drive cars are also pedestrians, and so kind of pigeonholing people into a driver versus a person who rides a bike versus a pedestrian is really, I think, one of the reasons why we have a hard time getting past this conversation about bikes versus cars.
One Chicago alderman wants to license bikes, charge $25 per bike, and require that all cyclists take a safety course in order to get a license to ride. Good idea?
So from our research and where this has been tried in other cities, it just really hasn't gone well. And sort of registering a large-scale registration program like that might end up costing more than it would take in revenue. And so we don't think that's a very positive idea. We also think that we should be removing obstacles to cycling instead of putting them up.
What about the safety aspect of requiring cyclists to take a rules of the road course?
So again, education is a huge, in addition to sort of the infrastructure changes we were talking about, education is a huge strategy, and one that we would love to see a lot more robust initiatives to educate cyclists and drivers and pedestrians and people who use transit. That said, again, sort of this, the mandatory education it's become a kind of a cumbersome administrative.
No, drivers have to go through it.
Sure. And we would love to see, I think we would love to see bike education, pedestrian education being rolled into the driver education that we're all, so being kind of baked into the existing curriculum for driver education in schools that already exist.
So when you get a driver's license, you know the rules of the road for cyclists as well.
Exactly.
So we saw the incredible growth in these Divvy bikes coming up. What's that going to mean in practical terms for the city and bikes?
Sure. Well, I think we've already kind of gotten a preview of what it means in terms of just getting a lot more people are going to be out using bikes as transit and not just for that weekend ride or for that trip around the neighborhood, but really we have the Divvy bike share program is the first new transportation system in the city in the 21st century, and so I think we can expect to see a lot more people riding bikes, and we can see people who maybe don't fit the profile, or at least the perception of people who ride bikes currently in the city.
One of the criticisms has been that the Divvy bikes are concentrated downtown, lakeshore, tourist areas, but not so much in the neighborhoods, particularly on the west and south sides.
Sure, yeah, and that's something that we've heard too. And I think what I understand is sort of the city took a lot of time looking at other experiences of other cities rolling out bike share programs, and they've noticed that you really need to kind of start with a strong core and be able to build the program out. But as we already saw yesterday, there's new plans to expand 75 new stations. So, and I know aldermen are asking, business owners are interested in Divvy stations. So I think the initial plans are just the beginning, and we're excited to see this expand.
Have you ridden one of these yet?
Oh, I sure have.
Because
yeah.
I was reading one review that called them the Clydesdales of bicycles because they're so big and clunky.
Yeah, I think, so it's sort of it's the right tool for the right job. If you're thinking about these as practical transportation, a city like Chicago, which has an intense freeze-thaw cycle, our roads get torn up every winter. Lots of exciting weather to contend with, and so I actually feel really confident riding those bikes. It's like a tank that you can kind of take on any challenge. Whereas the bike I generally ride is a little faster, lighter, but by the same token, less resilient to some of those obstacles that you face out there.
Very quickly, because we have to wrap up, do you ever see Chicago becoming a classic bike city such as Amsterdam?
I think that's really the vision. And so, we at Active Transportation Alliance and our 7,000 members and our thousands of supporters, that's really what we're working towards. And sort of that vision of how can we bring that experience to a city like Chicago that has such great untapped potential to become the most bike-friendly city in the country.
On that note, thank you very much for joining us, Jim. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now for some other trending stories this week. Gay marriage gets a major boost, and a suburban library gets an earful. And here's Barbara with more.
Thanks, Chris. Also, Lisa Madigan sues to stop one company allegedly polluting city neighborhoods with black soot. And Chicago loses a culinary giant.
We're done. We're done. Hallelujah, we're done.
An historic week in Springfield. Illinois is on the cusp of becoming the 15th state to allow same-sex marriage. After passionate debate, the House narrowly passed the marriage equality bill.
What this bill is about is love. It is about family. It is about commitment.
Real marriage is the building block for human civilization.
Governor Quinn promised to sign the measure into law, paving the way for the state's first same-sex weddings next June. Should public libraries allow computer access to pornography? Orland Park is in the crosshairs of a debate over First Amendment rights.
I saw 3 different men viewing 3 different screens full of pornography right in the middle of the day.
Nobody should have access to that in a public place.
They should do it on their own time, in their own environment, not in somewhere public.
Attorney General Lisa Madigan filed suit against one of the companies storing sky-high piles of refinery waste along the Calumet River. Neighborhoods on Chicago's southeast side have been blanketed with thick black dust from the waste called petroleum coke.
The biggest problem is the regulations aren't stiff enough. We need stronger regulations.
Several residents in the affected areas have also filed a separate lawsuit. And a stunning loss. Award-winning Chicago chef Charlie Trotter dies unexpectedly at age 54. The food world is mourning a man who gave fine dining a new meaning.
He took us to places that we didn't think he could take us. He was the man of excellence.
An autopsy has yet to reveal how Chef Trotter died.
More on Chef Trotter and his legacy in a minute. Today we are joined by our panel, Kyle Hillman, CEO of Kyle Hillman Strategy Group, Lauren Blair, blogger and partner at Peterson and Haupt Law Firm, and Congressman Danny Davis, representative of the 7th Congressional District. Welcome to you all today.
Thank you.
Good to be here. Well, this week, after a lot of debate, the Illinois House narrowly passed the marriage equality bill, paving the way for same-sex marriages here in Illinois. Lauren, was this the right choice?
Oh my gosh. I say it's about time. I mean, I'm now proud that Illinois has joined the growing number of states in this country to legalize same-sex marriage and give legitimacy to diverse families who've been looking to be a part of the promise of that important civil liberty for Americans in this country. So I think it's long overdue. And I think the state was moving in that direction. I think the pendulum has swung from the Supreme Court decision in June, striking down DOMA and its definition of marriage between a man and a woman for federal benefit purposes, to Pope Francis's proclamation in July that if a person happens to be gay but seeks God and has good acts, then who is he to judge?
Well, that was interesting because the Illinois Catholic Conference weighed in saying they're deeply disappointed in the decision, yet House Speaker Mike Madigan did quote the Pope in his decision. How much weight did that carry, Kyle?
You know, you never underestimate the Catholic Church in Springfield. It was, you know, it was a hard-fought battle. This thing has been going on. When we were in the spring, we were still eight votes short. I worked this bill incredibly hard, and I have to say, like there were people that wanted to do the right thing, but that there were so many pressures, whether it's from their church, from their neighborhood, from other organizations. It's nice that we finally did the right thing. You know, it's a good day to be in Illinois.
Congressman, you are well aware of those pressures in making decisions on a daily basis. This measure needed 60 votes. It squeaked by with 61. 3 of those votes were Republicans who crossed party lines, including Tom Cross, who's running for state treasurer. What might this mean on election day or in the election season for those Republicans who crossed party lines?
Well, I don't think that people are going to look at whether or not one crossed the line. But I always try to live by 2 principles. One of those is do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And so you put yourself in a position. The other is I've always considered myself a supporter of human rights, but I also recognize that my rights end where the next person's rights begin. And so I think that the legislature has crafted a good bill, a protective bill that will allow many people to exercise what they feel they must do as we implement same-sex marriage in Illinois.
You talk about human rights. Should this be seen as a civil right?
Well, it's a civil right, it's a human right, and it's also a religious right for those individuals who see it differently. And it's quite all right that they do, and they have the opportunity to opt out of certain provisions if they don't want to. For example, religious groups who don't think that it's appropriate certainly do not have to adhere in terms of practices within their churches or within their institutions. So that's why I say it's a well-crafted piece of legislation.
Now, some of the members of the Legislative Black Caucus were lobbied hard on this issue. There was concern that they would vote against same-sex marriage, yet 14 of the 20 members voted for same-sex marriage. Does this say something, Kyle, about the influence of the church versus the influence of public sentiment?
No, you know, you're elected to represent that area, and there's no question that some of those individuals were seeing some immense pressure from organized churches and groups within there. But when you talk to those representatives, they always wanted to do the right thing, but the question is to also respect, you know, the voters that put them into that place. And so, you know, I think the delay was the right move, and by pushing it from May to this point, it gave those representatives a little bit more time to talk to those constituents, and was able for them to make the vote that, to me, was the right choice. But when you really talk to them, even back in the spring, they wanted to do the right thing. It's just you still have to balance why you're the people that elected you there.
Let's talk about priorities. Should same-sex marriage have been the headline of this session, or should lawmakers have concentrated their efforts on solving this crushing $100 billion pension deficit? Congressman?
Well, I think for many of the legislators, the pension deficit is a more difficult, complex in their minds problem. And you can have different priorities. There are things that come up, and it's time now to move on them. Certainly, we have many problems in our society. We have many problems in our state. They still have not arrived at a conclusion in terms of the pension problem, and it's going to take a bit more time. But I think they've done well. They've done well.
We're watching this pension problem tick on, costing millions of dollars every day. Lauren, how fed up should taxpayers be that there is no resolution here?
Well, taxpayers have to get in line with a long number of other folks who are fed up. The retirees who may be left holding the bag are going to be fed up. The bondholders who have loaned money to the state, they may be fed up. Those people in need who won't be getting critical social service programs because of budget cuts. So taxpayers will just have to get in line with any number of groups and individuals who are going to be frustrated with this immense pension problem that we have. It's not easy to solve.
All right, we'll go from one battleground to another. Some residents of Orland Park are challenging a public policy at the library that makes pornography available on adult-only computers. Lauren, we'll start with you. You're the lawyer. Does the First Amendment give us a right to view porn at the public library?
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to sink my teeth into this. I view this as a mom on a mission, and I say that not to suggest that this mom isn't passionate about her mission, but I really take personal issue when an individual tries to impose their morality to restrict my civil liberties. And although I'm not a constitutional law expert or an expert on the First Amendment, let's step back to Civics 101. Pornography is the expression of sexual material designed to arouse the audience. Well, the First Amendment, among other things, says Congress shall not enact any laws that abridge the freedom of speech.
But at a public library?
Well, freedom of speech extends today to all forms of expression that not just offend some, but offend many. But pornography, not all pornography, is illegal. Obscenity and child pornography are illegal. And I do think it's really important to distinguish between this library not restricting access versus them not having policies in place to protect the public. And it's my understanding that they do. It's my understanding that children and teenage computers are restricted access, that the adult computers are on a different floor, and that there are screens.
Kyle, the moms say this makes the library attractive to what they call perverts and sex offenders. Do they have a point?
No, I mean, look, I'm a little concerned about the slippery slope aspect of it. And actually, if you look at the library has policies against porn. You're not actually allowed to watch porn at the library. The difference is that they just don't have the filters that control what you're allowed to see. And so, that piece concerns me of when does it end? So when you have a mayor or a library board that has a certain view, and they start saying, well, we don't want negative stuff to appear on those computers as well. So, I think, I'm a little less stringent on this issue. I think you could probably position those computers so that they could monitor them a little bit more, so that maybe you don't have this going on as much. But I'm a little bit against the filter concept.
Congressman, your thoughts?
Well, I think our public policy decision-making processes oftentimes work. One library board may make a decision that they will have certain policies in place. Another library board in a different community may very well make a different decision. There are laws that we have beyond which they cannot go, and so I think that the board is within its right. I also think that the parent is within her right to advocate for what she believes, and the board will ultimately make a decision.
All right, quick turn to the lawsuit filed by Attorney General Lisa Madigan this week against one of two companies storing tons of refinery waste on the banks of the Calumet River. They could be fined $50,000 for every instance of pollution and $10,000 a day until it's cleaned up. Obviously, this pet coke, as it's called, is blowing black dust into some neighborhoods. Will those fines, Lauren, make a big difference? Will those lawsuits make a difference?
Well, that's a good question. And I absolutely think the lawsuits will make a difference. And I don't know if it will necessarily play out in the class action that was filed last week by individual residents, or as well as the injunctive lawsuit that was filed by the Attorney General's office. So it may not play out in litigation, which takes tremendous time and money, but I do think that now that this issue is in the forefront of the public purview, that these companies are in no interest of having this play out in the public forum, especially in the media. So I do think, and it's my understanding that Beamster Bohr Slag has already been in contact with the IEPA. So I anticipate that these companies will be aggressively working with the IEPA, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, to resolve these issues.
Now, according to the Chicago Tribune, the EPA visited the site last May, but they didn't issue any enforcement action until the story ended up in the Chicago Tribune on our airwaves. So how troubling is this, Congressman?
Well, I think that the state of Illinois is very fortunate to have a proactive Attorney General who recognizes that it is her job to protect the public interest, that she is indeed the people's lawyer. This is a people's issue, and she's raising it in such a way that ultimately the courts may have to make a decision, and that's how we've structured our society to make these kind of decisions.
All right, we're out of time. We'll have to leave it there. We will talk more about Charlie Trotter on WYCC.org in our after show. Kyle Hillman, Lauren Blair, Congressman Danny Davis, we thank you for your time. Last spring, the Chicago Sun-Times made a drastic decision to lay off its photography staff, including a winner of the prestigious Pulitzer Prize, saying it needed to shift focus to online video. The paper is one of many pinched by the shift to digital media at a time where nearly half of us get our news from mobile devices. This symbolizes the plight of many in print media these days who feel their life's work is being trampled underfoot in this digital age. Among them, 28 Chicago Sun-Times photographers who spent decades making the photos that made the headlines. They never pictured this.
They brought us into the steamboat room on the 14th floor, and they said your whole department's being eliminated. Everybody was heartbroken. I don't think there was one person in there that imagined that this could happen to them.
12-year veteran Rob Hart was caught by surprise, told he'd be replaced by reporters with iPhones. We met up with him at the Billy Goat restaurant. He said he and his colleagues, the city, and Sun-Times readers have all lost something important.
Visual reporting and reporting with words use different parts of your brain. I mean, my pediatrician is a great pediatrician, but she couldn't give me a root canal.
Owen Youngman agrees. He's a professor of digital media strategy at Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism and spent 37 years at the Chicago Tribune.
You know, it's unfortunate for the quality of the images, and it deprives readers of the particular expertise point of view of a photographer who's not merely a stenographer, but often brings a lot of interesting independent ideas based on experience to a story.
So should we worry about a society that gets its news from the internet instead of a paper?
The Greek philosophers decried the advent of the book because people now could look things up instead of actually learn them.
But Youngman does worry about people who are now free to choose only the stories that pique their interest.
One of the things that's of concern is the degree to which people will accept superficial information rather than in-depth information in the course of making the crucial decisions they need to make about how we govern ourselves or about what's best for their families.
What's best for Rob Hart these days is the photojournalism he loves. He's freelancing for the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and Chicago Tribune.
This camera, or its many brothers and sisters before it, have been with me every day of my life since I turned 19 years old. So, you know, hopefully we're going to have some more good times.
That's it for tonight. You are now in the loop. Until next week, I'm Barbara Pinto.
And I'm Chris Bury. Goodbye.